13. The roll call, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham? Here. Councilmember Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick? Here. Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
All present. We have one discussion item this evening. That's a discussion for an interview the executive search firms. And before we start, I'll call upon Mary Beth Mertz, our purchasing director or manager, to just briefly tell us what's in the packet, and then we'll call in the first firm, and then Mary Beth will also make an opening statement there. And at this time, I'll excuse Acting City Manager Mark Miller from the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you later. Mary Beth, cheers.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to review what you have in your packet. First thing is your interview agenda. We're interviewing 3 firms, and each firm will have 40 minutes, so I'll be your timekeeper. That'll help keep us on task. And then I also provided one set of council members develop the questions that they want to ask. And so I have a set of questions so that for each firm, so that if you want to take notes or whatever during the interview to help aid in making your decision, you can do that. Also in your packet is a scoring tool that council can use if you so desire, or you direct me to do that. There's a form where you would rank the interviews, and then I can put it up on the screen to come up with a score. That's just one option to aid in making the decision. Perhaps you won't even need to use that. You'll come to a decision collaboratively without it. So that's everything. And so each firm will come in, and what they'll do is we'll give them about 3 to 5 minutes for introductions, and then start with the questions. And Mayor, you have the first question, and everyone would just follow along.
And we'll do the exact same thing for every firm. Same questions, same format, same everything, so that it's fair to everyone.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, Mayor, I can grab the first firm if you're ready.
Thank you. I'll just ask them to introduce themselves.
Are the other 2 firms within earshot?
No. They're sequestered
Sequestered in a lead-lined vault.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon.
We have some folders to hand out to you. They do have a couple more pieces of information in it for you, so
Thank you.
we hate to kill more trees, but we think it's important that you have it.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Heidi Voorhees with GovHR. I'm the co-owner. And this is my colleague, James Petrano.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you want us to do a brief overview, or if you want to go right into questions.
That would be great if you could. We have 40 minutes.
Right.
So I'll be the timekeeper.
Okay.
So I'll give you the high sign when you have 5 minutes left. If you want to take 5 minutes the most for an overview.
Sure.
And then council members have questions composed that they will be asking. Mayor will start with the first question and go around. So there's 7 questions.
Okay.
And then hopefully a little bit of time for any follow-up discussion or conclusions.
Okay. Well, we're used to being succinct. We've both been city managers, so we understand how to do that, and then the importance of your time. Just in the folder that you have, I just wanted to tell you what you have. You have what is often the basis of our presentation. It's a printed out PowerPoint. It allows you to kind of go through that. If you have any questions later on about some of our approaches or the experience. On the left is the proposal, the timeline, which gives you an idea of how we would approach it. And then the last item is a letter from the mayor of Grand Rapids, which addresses, we know there were some concerns about our firm's work there. So before this came up, she had sent us a letter of reference. So we wanted to include that so you would have her perspective on our firm's work for their city. But Before we get into the specific questions, as I said, I'm Heidi Voorhees, the co-owner of GovHR USA. I have more than 35 years experience both in local government management and in consulting. I've spent 19 years directly working for local governments, 10 of those as a city manager in the Chicago suburbs. And then for the last 17 years have been working in recruitment and selection, and have done approximately 250 different recruitments, all sizes, from a community of 1,000 to communities of 1 million. We've worked in 26 different states. And I think if I were to summarize our approach, we believe strongly in partnering with you and transparency. We have a software system that if you want to dial right into it and see who is applying, you can do that. We, obviously we need to talk about confidentiality of the client, of the candidates' names, but we will share with you everything that we have with respect to the recruitment. We also believe strongly in outreach. This is a very tough time in recruiting. I think you've probably all read about the baby boomers retiring. Well, that is really happening, and the group that is coming up behind them is about half to two-thirds the size. There are not enough people to fill into those positions that are being vacated. So what that means is we work very hard on outreach to make sure that potential candidates are aware of the opportunity. We've presented candidates from traditional city manager candidates, folks with nonprofit background, private sector background, as well as former military candidates. And we've had success with all of those. So I think nowadays we try to take a broad view of a candidate's experience. The ideal person, of course, is someone who's had some time with local government, because it's not a starter job, as you all know. It's operating with complete transparency is a different way to operate, and that's something that we want to be sure candidates know how to do. So our relationship with you is to market this opportunity to the best of our ability using social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, as well as traditional methods, picking up the phone and calling people, of course placing notices in appropriate journals and websites, but really to make sure that as many people across the country know about this opportunity. And the reason I say across the country is you never know who wants to come home, and we have seen that more and more. People may start their career here, they leave, and then they want to come back for a variety of reasons. And that has been a trend that we have seen in our recruitment. So I'll stop there and let James
I'll just give you a
introduce.
couple minutes on myself. James Petrano. I was a city manager for 17 years. The final 8 of my career was in the city of Rochester. I was the city manager there through 2015. Actually, GovHR was hired to find my replacement when I went to Rochester College and Oakland University to teach at Rochester College full-time and in the MPA department at OU. I was so impressed with how GovHR handled our recruitment in Rochester. I had the opportunity to be part of it. That I said if I want to do consulting along with working at the colleges, it would be a firm that I'd want to work with. So for almost 3 years now, I've been working with GovHR on recruitments. Most recently, I had the opportunity to do the recruitment in Kent County, which was a really good recruitment here in the state of Michigan for their county executive. So I appreciate your time very much this afternoon. And I think what I would bring obviously is local knowledge of Oakland County. I literally live 15 minutes from this building, but you have a national recruiting firm that is at your disposal out of Chicago too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll ask the first question. I think some of the questions you may have already covered some of it, but you did supply a timeline, but if you could please review the anticipated timeline to complete the executive search, if you could do that for us.
Absolutely. Just to give you a benchmark, what we tell our clients is 90 days from the time you sign the contract, we should be ready to appoint, if we can get everybody's calendars to work. And that we've had people say it cannot be done. It can be done. We do it frequently. Sometimes there are delays, but primarily due to calendars. And what we think is important up front is to work with you on establishing those calendars and those dates, so everyone knows, a few months out when we're going to be back to present candidates, when you all will be interviewing. And then, once you make a decision, candidates usually have to give 30 days notice, 60 days notice. So you'll be ready to appoint, and then the candidate will have to negotiate their separation from the entity that they're at, unless it's an internal candidate, of course. So we would start right away with interviewing you all and coming on site, meeting with department heads, learning as much as possible about your community and what's going on here. We would love to do a tour. We want to really understand, because we've been city managers, but every city is different. And we know what we've read, that it's a AAA rated community, and I was a manager in a AAA rated community. I know how important that is, and that's always a key factor for looking for the next city manager, someone who understands that and works hard to maintain that. But we also need to understand your culture as a council and as an organization, so that we can look for candidates that will fit with what you're looking for. So that would be right away. We would get the position announcement done. We would share everything with you before it goes out, or if you have a designee on the council, we can do that. And then develop a recruitment brochure that we would send out via PDF. We don't print those anymore unless you really want us to, but everything is done, online, so it's not really necessary. And then spend about 6 weeks really actively recruiting, and then we need 3 weeks to do our due diligence on the candidates. We Skype or FaceTime interview with anyone that we think we might present to you. We do reference checks, newspaper searches, internet searches. We want to know as much as we can about the candidate. And then we would send you a recruitment report a few days in advance of coming to meet with you and walking you through that recruitment report. And then probably 2 to 3 weeks later, you would interview.
Great. If you see some of us with our heads down and writing, it's not out of disrespect.
No, I like that. It means I'm saying something you want to make a note of.
We're just taking notes, and
Yeah,
but we are paying attention.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll call on Councilman Henderson for the next question.
So we're looking for the best of the best, naturally, here for Troy, and you kind of touched on it, the national search. There's so many areas in the country that have good quality people out there that may or may not want to move to Troy. Give us a detailed plan on how do you expect to reach all those nooks and crannies to try to bring us that individual?
Well, we do make heavy use of social media, LinkedIn especially. I personally have almost 5,000 contacts on LinkedIn, so we use that to really, because what we're trying to capture with LinkedIn is the people who don't know that they're looking for a job. Often somebody will say, I was kind of on LinkedIn and I happened to see this, and that's what we want. And then we also will develop a database specific to Troy, so looking for people who are in communities that would be a natural transition to Troy, either somebody moving up, somebody moving over, maybe a deputy in a larger city. We look for those candidates and we specifically target them across the country. It's a small city management community, really. I mean, and we have consultants in Arizona, we have consultants in Florida, we have consultants in Wisconsin. So and our co-owner, Joellen Earl, is from the Northeast. So we know people all over the country who we can also reach out. But so it's word of mouth, it's social media, it's targeted emails, and it's advertising in all the places that people look. But ideally, we're looking for those folks that don't even know they want to move, but when they hear about Troy, they'll want to come here.
And I would just put an exclamation mark on that regional approach. So the consultants so if I'm GovHR's Michigan person, there's people like me in all those other states, and that's where I think they know the people that may not quite be looking, but if there's the right opportunity, they'd be willing to. Because that really are the tough candidates to find. If they see it on LinkedIn the third time, they think, well, now maybe I will, and they get a call from a recruiter from their state to say, hey, why don't you take a look, and they've had that opportunity to see them before. Because everybody will generate the same list out of the ICMA and the MML listings. We will all get you those candidates. It's that network that I think brings value.
Very good. Councilwoman Ellen Holderich has the next question.
Hi. If you can describe in detail how you will develop a comprehensive position profile for the city manager position, which would be approved by us as a council, ensuring that we as a body are on the same page in terms of our priorities for a council candidate. You know that challenge.
Well, we would ideally, we would want to meet with you individually to talk with you about what you are seeking. Some councils want to do it as a group, and that's fine as well if you want to do that, but our preference is to meet with you individually and see if we're seeing consistent themes. And also at the same time, we would be meeting with the staff members, department heads, and if there's folks in the community that you would like us to meet with, we often do quite a bit of public engagement where we might meet with the Chamber of Commerce folks, people from the schools. I'm just concluding a very large public engagement process for the police chief decision-making process in Austin, Texas. So we took in input from 8 different locations, and we can do surveys, we can do community surveys. We've done that. We did it in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There's a lot of different ways to allow people to provide input. But you as a group, we would meet with you individually. We would share with you what else we've learned from the other outreach that we've done and build consensus. I've never had a conflict in getting to what's important. It seems like, the group kind of comes together on that and sees the same themes that we see.
Thank you. Calling Councilman Hamilton for the next question.
What will be unique about your search? What will you do that other firms won't, or what won't you do that other firms do?
Well, it's hard because I don't know other firms' processes, but I do think that the things that we routinely hear about from both candidates and clients is the thoroughness of our recruitment brochure. We do really make an effort for it to be very thorough, very focused. We're very specific about the challenges and the opportunities that the position presents. And over I've heard people tell us that it answered their questions and was something that they found very easy to read and helpful. So I think it's immersing ourselves into your community and meeting with all of you to really put together a terrific marketing piece. And I also think that our use of social media and our outreach is something that we work very hard at, and we have a dedicated staff person who just keeps pushing it out over Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We just keep it out there so folks are aware of it. I think that's also unique. And I also believe that we're very transparent with you. We will tell you everything that we know about a candidate. We want you to know everything that we know. And we will be very honest with you about our opinion. And we will give you our opinion of that person after doing a Skype or a FaceTime interview. So when we meet with you to go over candidates, you'll have that honest feedback.
I'll add one of the things that we really liked in Rochester was that blend of a national firm that I raised earlier with local knowledge, and having the opportunity to do a number of searches now in Michigan, understanding the specific open meetings and FOIA requirements in Michigan is something that we've made our business. And obviously as a city manager, I understood it from that perspective, but I also now understand it through this process and when you could potentially go into closed session to review paper resumes only and when it must be a public session. Obviously we work very closely with your city attorney to get those opinions to agree with what we believe are the cases we found in the other cities that we've done. But that local knowledge, very specific to Michigan, of your open meetings and FOIA requirements is something that I think we bring to the table.
Very good. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Councilman Pennington for the next question.
Thanks for coming. Part of this you've already answered, but I'm going to read it just like it's written. City Council requires comprehensive background checks. What screening do you do on the candidates? When do you do it? And how do you get this information to us on City Council?
Before we present a candidate to you, we will have done at least 2 reference calls on them, both a subordinate and a supervisor. We work with the candidate. If they're not comfortable with it from their current organization, we'll try to get the most immediate one. But we want to get it helps round out what we think we see with the candidate, so we do that. We also, before we even interview someone ourselves, we have done an internet search on them to really have a sense of what's out there already. And And then we do a media search. We use the Dow Jones media search process, and we pull down every article wherever they've worked so that we have a sense of what's out there from a media standpoint. Candidates that, and we continue to do reference calls if they're on the ones that are selected for an interview. Then if they haven't wanted us to talk to their organization at that point, we can, we'll say, okay, we need to talk to your organization and understand, more recently what you've accomplished and hear it from them. And we also have a third-party vendor that where we do the felony, misdemeanor, run their driver's license, everything that's allowed under federal law and the state of Michigan law. So we have those. That document as well. We don't fingerprint people. We don't go in and pull court cases. That's a little deeper dive, and we can put you in touch with people that do that. But we can provide you with that information.
There's court cases, yeah, that would be.
Well, usually they're out there, so you can. Most of them are public, but sometimes people want to go actually into the courthouse and see what else is there.
Yeah, the court case itself would come up in the Dow Jones search.
Yeah, hopefully.
But that deeper piece, and of course we check educational credentials also.
Right, we always verify education. And we give candidates an opportunity when when we want to interview them, we ask them to fill out paperwork in advance, so we give them an opportunity to disclose to us if they've ever been involved in litigation or accused of civil rights violations or sexual harassment or those kinds of things. So they have an opportunity to say, this is out there, it's not me. Some say, it's the same name, but it's not me, or it's a DUI or something else, and they tell us they have a chance to disclose that to us in advance and talk to us about it. So we do give them that opportunity.
It's hard to hide from Google today, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Next, I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Abraham for the next question.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for coming. So City Council naturally has a very optimistic view of our upside potential, and we assume that top candidates are going to apply. Build it and they will come, right? So do you perceive any obstacles in attracting top candidates? And in your view, is there anything that we as a council can do to make sure that we attract the best candidates?
Yeah, I think in general, obstacles to people applying, what we've learned is if the council is divided, if there's a sharp division, city managers will be nervous about that. I like to say that when I did the Janesville, Wisconsin recruitment, GM announced they were closing, the downtown flooded, and it didn't scare off a single candidate. They're up for the challenges. It's if there's difficult politics that they get nervous. So there's that. If there's a known strong internal candidate, that can be also limiting to people who are in the state if they are aware of that, and also if their names are ultimately going to be disclosed. Some people will say, well, I don't want to go through that if there's a chance I'm not, if I don't have a chance at getting the job. So that's always something to keep in mind. And then I think just what I opened with is the general demographics we're seeing it for sure. It's not that the people aren't out there, but the other challenge you have, and I haven't asked this question, but if you do require residency, and I know you have great schools, so I know that's not, and that will actually be an attraction. That will be wonderful. But people do hesitate to move their families. So you have to hit them at the right point where they can move their family, take advantage of your excellent school system. And I did see that happen recently in Connecticut, where a number of the candidates who were interested in one of the jobs that we had, the school system was a huge factor. So that can work to your benefit. But it also, a lot of people are hesitant to move their family, even if it is a better school system. If their kids are in high school, unless they have to, they hesitate to pick up and move. So that's also a challenge. Did I leave any?
No, I think for this recruitment specifically, Troy has a great brand in the state of Michigan, so I think you're going to definitely see the top tier candidates in Michigan look at the job. We don't have that many big cities in Michigan. I mean, you guys are aware of that. You're the largest in Oakland County, and there's not a lot of comparable cities here in Michigan for those quick transitions where you just see, okay, that's where I'm going to progress to. So I think it being more broad and more national and getting the candidates to come in and really understand it, that'll be a challenge. They have to understand Troy as well as we understand it locally and the quality of the community. But I really look forward to kind of communicating as I get to personally with those candidates about the school system, about the local region, about the proximity to, Detroit and the opportunities that are in Southeast Michigan.
Thank you.
Next is Councilman Baker.
Hi. Thank you. So my question's a little different. It's along the same lines. Life and success is often about learning from past mistakes or missteps. Please describe a hiring process experience that perhaps did not go as you had planned, but provided you with a great learning experience for your next hiring, and how that would be a benefit to us in Troy.
I think, I'm trying to think of one that's.
I'll give you 10 seconds. Not kidding.
Well,
I'll jump on real quick. I did the Grand Traverse County search. And it was a really good process that we went through, and we appointed a candidate from another state, and she relocated there. But throughout it was an issue of that move was very far for her, and she ultimately decided to return back. I don't know that I would have done anything different because it was a really good match, a good fit, but maybe I would have prepared the elected officials a little bit deeper right before the appointment to say you really need to encourage that as quickly as possible and figure it out so that you could make that transition with her as quickly as possible. And it goes to our guarantee because she did leave. We're back there doing it again and going to find them a really good candidate again. But that's one that I think I've learned, when it's that out of state, you really need to have the councils themselves develop that relationship much quicker and sooner than maybe an internal or a close proximity candidate.
And I think, going to the Grand Rapids process, I wasn't on that one, but was, certainly we were all aware of it. I think there was a very tight time frame, and it's alluded to, I think, in the media. And we did our very best. It was a time frame set by the city, and that's what and maybe we should have tried to expand that a little more, or expand, said, I think we did try to, we made that effort, but they really felt like they wanted to get that started, and we understand that. So you always walk that fine line between how hard do you push when you think it could be challenging and wanting to do what the client wants. So, and I think if you read in the articles, one of the aldermen said they did exactly what we asked them to do, from the timeline perspective. So that would, that might be a lesson learned, just to jump up and down a little more maybe.
Thank you. Well, those are the 7 questions that we had. We're a little above schedule, so it's an opportunity for some follow-up, or if you wanted to expand on any of the questions that were asked. Any council member have a follow-up question? We'll start with Councilman Henderson.
Just a quick one on warranty.
Oh,
What
right.
if we get a candidate and
Right.
everything works out great, and then they
Right. Yeah, and it happens, I think we calculated just under 2% of the time the warranty is invoked. So we are back, and we do it, and for any reason if they leave. And we've had, people leave because of, elder parent issues. As James just said, somebody who wasn't happy being north, illness, whatever it is, we come at not a fit. And all we do is charge you the advertising expenses and the whatever the consultant travel expenses are, but the fee is completely on us. So we do the outreach, and we've had good success with the replacements. We had one in Lake Lure, North Carolina, which is a beautiful resort community, and the person left, and within 30 days, because everyone wants to be there, we had 100 candidates, and they found somebody, and that person lasted for many years. So we are able to mobilize very quickly and get back in there, and you're interviewing again, final 2 candidates in Grand Traverse next week. So, we'll get right on it if it happens, no questions asked.
Councilman Banker?
2 years, right.
So I'm just curious, as a search firm, you're not just searching for city managers. What is the percent of city managers compared to like other officials that you search for?
I haven't done, it's our largest percentage, definitely. But I don't know the exact number. I can get it back to you. But it is our largest effort. And we do a lot in public safety, a lot in police, a lot of police chief work, finance directors, planners, and engineers. We usually get hired for the really tough ones, which is finance and engineering. We have a lot of activity in those two areas as well. And we've done some national associations, the Government Finance Officers Association, the International City and County Management Association, those executive directors. And also, I've done all of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the GASB board members. So we've done some nonprofit as well as some for-profit work.
Council, opportunity to wrap it up. Something that we didn't cover that you would like to say, or something that...
Yeah, I don't think we forgot anything. I think that, you know, the opportunity to manage through this time of transition for Troy, I mean, obviously it's a great opportunity and there's risks whenever there's that opportunity. And I think particularly because I'm a former city manager, Heidi's a former city manager, most of our GovHR, or many of our GovHR consultants are former city managers. I think we bring that perspective, an empathetic perspective particularly, both for the elected officials and for the candidates. You know, our goal is always to make the match. So if a candidate doesn't fit the personality of the council, it doesn't matter how good the candidate is. We will really try and dig that extra step deeper. I think that from our city management experience allows us to ask the questions both of you and of the department heads, so that when I get the call, and we will get the call from good candidates, what's really going on there? That's the call we will get from the good candidates. Our brochure is going to be great. It's going to get them to make that call. And I think having an understanding of government here in Michigan, of Troy as a community, of, you know, having my parents have lived in Troy and being in the city of Rochester, I can actually answer that question for this region, but more so answer it as a city manager, understanding the perspective of the electeds and the candidates.
And I think it allows us to read between the lines with candidates as well. You know, we really do understand the world of local government, and when they tell us something that doesn't add up, then we can probe or we can draw our own conclusions about what they're really talking about, and I think that that's very valuable. And that combined with, as I started out in the beginning, we will partner with you, we will be transparent, we will tell you everything. You know, you can see every resume. If you want to see every resume, we're happy to do that electronically or paper. So we view this as a true partnership and something, and a collaboration. And starting from putting together a calendar that everyone can adhere to and live with, so that we can meet your schedule. But we would love the opportunity to market Troy and help you find your next city manager.
Thank you very much. Great job. Very good.
No problem. Thank you. Good luck with the rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Maybe a tough choice.
But do they look for besides you?
Yeah.
That is a scam.
Yeah. Couldn't be the only thing, did you?
Makes the decision harder when you sit across and you meet somebody rather than just reading their stuff.
Yeah.
It's really the way to do it.
Yeah.
If you have to do it again, I think you always want to do this. Camera's rolling.
Pardon me?
Cameras roll.
No. I'm sure the mics are off though.
was I out?
Isn't there a skater that got in trouble for that? She was at Disneyland. Yeah. Nancy Kerrigan. She made fun of, she's in a parade with
Her eyes or
Disney parade.
something?
No, she was making fun of Mickey Mouse or something, or the whole process or something. She got booted. Oh, cool. Need that? Oh. Yeah, it's a Saturday, so it's a good deal. Is that an 18-year quote?
I write very random sprawling notes, so it helps.
We have Amy Sell here, but we do not have MML here yet. Would you like to take her out of order?
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready to bring her in now, or would you like a few minutes?
We're ready. I think we're good. Thank you.
Lou?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Troy.
Thank you.
We'll get you a couple minutes to settle in here.
Sure.
Okay, before we get going with the questions, I'm going to ask, we've got Mertz to just kind of tell you a little bit about the process that is going to take place, and then we'll get started.
Okay, hi, Amy. As I told you, council's here for a 40-minute interview, so you could spend about 3 to 5 minutes with a brief introduction.
Sure.
And then council members have questions prepared, and I'll be the timekeeper, so I'll give you a high sign if we get close to the 40-minute time frame. And also, council members have a form to fill out just to take notes. So if you see them taking notes, that's what they're doing, just so they remember everything in the interview. So go ahead and get started.
Sure, well, I'm so excited to be here after watching you on TV for a couple of council meetings. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of my background and introduction because it frames things a little bit. My name is Amy Sell. I'm born and raised in Michigan. Went to school in the state of Michigan. Initially was focusing on public accounting and did that for a couple of years at Plant Moran. I decided I liked people a little bit more. Longer story, which I'll save for later. But went back to and got my MBA from the University of Michigan, focusing on corporate strategy and organizational behavior. I worked in corporate HR for a few years at Ford Motor Company before going to California, where I worked for a few other companies in HR before coming back to Michigan in 2004. Worked briefly at the University of Michigan in a student life area, kind of quasi-HR, where I taught. When I got that opportunity, it was kind of great to work on leadership development and diversity and do many of the things, but not quite HR, but launch. It was a neat opportunity. But I decided after a few years to kind of go back, and I was really excited about startups at the time that I got to experience in California. And there was an organization called Ann Arbor Spark that was launching.
Luck would have it that they had a talent position open. And I was able to take that position and kind of be the HR manager for Washtenaw County for about 4 years, where I developed programs to attract, retain, and develop talent for the area. After about 4.5 years, our board chair became governor. So he took my boss, Mike Finney, up to lead the State Economic Development Corporation, and I became the Senior Vice President of Talent Enhancement for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, where I was able to implement programs to attract, retain, develop talent statewide. A couple of years ago, there was a consolidation. I started working as a consultant to spin out some of my programs that were anti-poverty related, but I was still being contacted by job seekers looking for jobs and entrepreneurs looking for talent. So I decided a little over 3 years ago to create my own recruiting firm because I was very passionate about talent. I knew talent was a big issue. Startups couldn't afford lower cost talent services, so we were able to put together a nice model to do that. Because I had designed some of the programs that they used at the state, including the new job portal. I was well versed in how to use tools effectively. So that was a little over 3 years ago. Now we have 12 people that are on our team. We've done over 400 searches, primarily for smaller startups, but we've done some automotive. We had done the search for the Grand Angels on the west side of the state. One of the board members then had put my name in the hat, and so we got a RFP for the city manager position for Holland late fall, and we thought it was interesting. We had never done anything like that, but we thought a lot of our skills were transferable. We ended up succeeding, did the RFP, interviewed a couple of times, and successfully completed that search most recently. And I can, I'm sure there'll be questions about that, which I'm happy to talk about. But I guess through that, it's been a great honor we're very passionate about Michigan, supporting companies, and we've developed a nice team and some effective processes that make us very excited about the opportunity to be able to bring those experiences and passion for Michigan to bear for this opportunity.
Great. Just to let you know that we all have the same questions that we asked the previous firm, so we want to be very consistent with our questions and make it fair to everyone. So we have the same questions that we asked each firm. So, and each council member will have one question and then an opportunity for possibly some follow-up and some closing remarks.
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
So I'll get started. Could you please review the anticipated timeline to complete the executive search for us?
Sure. So there's a few phases that it goes in. And kind of the active time that I would need would be a minimum of 10 weeks. There's a few variables, such as if you want to appoint a search committee and you have to work on meeting schedules around that. That's kind of one of the biggest variables that can take place in launching a search. But in general, there'll be about a month of planning in terms of deciding if you're going to have a search committee, who to put on that, making sure that you're following your appointment processes, putting together a community survey if we want to do that, working with your marketing team to figure out the channels to get that word out, and figuring out the schedule and timeline for the rest of the search. So that process takes about a month. At the end of that process, after I've been able to interview the members of council, the members of the city staff, also of the search committee, all of those inputs about what they really enjoyed about, what what their ideal city manager looks like, what the key priorities are for the community, what type of leadership style is most needed and desired for your team. I will come back and present to the search committee a job description and kind of a talent rubric, identifying about maybe 10 to 12 qualities that are very important for that search. And it's all going to be custom based on the input that I get from everyone and looking at understanding the issues that are facing Troy and what type of experiences are really core to having that. So that process takes about a month. Then we'd be ready to launch the search. We would post the job on many local, state, and national websites that focus on getting city manager candidates. I have a nice candidate pool, a distribution list ready to go from my prior search with Holland. Somebody actually from that pool had already reached out to me after they knew that I was going to be interviewing for this position. So we'll be able to quickly identify good candidates for you, and it takes about a month to source. So during this process, we will be posting and marketing the position. interviewing candidates, and putting high potential candidates through a background check and verifying their compensation expectations, so that we would winnow it down to a reasonable pool to present to the search committee. And this process takes a month. But at the end of that month, then we would have, in Holland, we had 7 candidates that I felt really good about out of our pool of 60 that I presented to the search committee. They chose to interview 3 of them. And we had already scheduled out when those interviews were going to happen, and we announced it to anybody that applied that was in the ballpark. We told them, these are the dates you want to reserve for these information, so block it out on your calendar so that as soon as the search committee needs to decide who to move forward with, about 2 weeks later, because we want to make sure there's a little bit of time for travel arrangements, then you can bring those folks in and do on-site interviews. You can have a community reception, and then you can also schedule the next day for the search committee to review the candidates to make the final decision to present to City Council if you end up going to that route. So again, the time frame of kind of active time, assuming that like you magically could appoint a search committee tomorrow, is about 10 weeks. But then if you add about a month to, with meeting schedules, so it might take about 14 to 17 weeks. But that's kind of the general time frame that we would work in. That worked very effectively for Holland, and I think would effectively work, because I know you're under a time pressure to move forward quickly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next, I'll call on Councilman Henderson, has the next question.
Hi. First off, thanks for watching our meetings.
Well, I'm a tennis player too, so I love the first one.
So we're looking, obviously, the best of the best, which everybody does, but in a nationwide search, trying to go to all the nooks and crannies in the United States, how do you propose you're going to facilitate that for us?
Well, there's a few job boards. The International City and County Managers Association, ICCMA, is a great resource nationally. And then obviously the Michigan Municipal League has a job board as well that's very well attended. And then in addition to that, I started with Holland, to put together a distribution list of city manager candidates and current city managers from around the country through LinkedIn. So I would just reach out to people and grab them, and so I have a national list of city manager candidates that I've already started. That's about 150. That I would, and then I would continue to add more to it. It would be another excuse to kind of add to my networking in this area even further. And then I would market to those folks, just asking them again if they're interested in the role, who they know that might be interested, and then those relationships will kind of help spread the word as well as the sources of the search. But I mean, job boards right now, there's some very well-known job boards in addition to Indeed and LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter and others that we use. But I mean, the ICCMA one is, and the Michigan Municipal League and the state of Michigan government job boards are pretty effective at getting the word out, as well as kind of pushing out to passive candidates.
Thank you. Sure. Next, I'll call on Councilwoman Hoderick for the next question.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'm surprised you still showed up after watching meetings.
Oh, yeah. Well, my parents were actually both on city council and mayor pro tem for City of Ann Arbor. So I've grown up if I want to see my mom at night. So
You're familiar then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, if you could describe in detail how you would help us develop a comprehensive position profile for this particular city manager position, which would be approved by Troy City Council, ensuring that we're working as a body, on the same page in terms of our priorities for a council candidate. How do you go through that process? What does that look like?
Yeah, this is absolutely key to the ability to do an effective search, in my opinion. And it involves really listening and understanding the community. And this is where interviewing, doing individual interviews. So I did about 25 interviews for Holland, where I talked to not only the city council, but the search committee, plus about 10 leaders from the city staff. And then we did the community survey that had over 100 inputs into it. And through that, I was able to, these were about half-hour to 45-minute interviews, where I would ask, what qualities are you looking for? Many people had a few city managers that they had been exposed to, so they had they could kind of talk about the pros and cons of different leadership styles and experiences and profiles and backgrounds that really gave me a good flavor. So that I could create what I call a talent rubric, this is the list of about 10 to 12 attributes that I'm going to be looking for and that I want everybody synced up. Because my biggest, the biggest fear in any search is that I bring forward a candidate that isn't what people want. And especially and I've done a few boards, CEO searches where there's been boards of directors or executive director where there's been boards, where getting everybody on the same page is absolutely critical. And so anyway, so I really value that input, and then if I can get this list of the key qualities that I heard that everybody can sign up to, as well as defining what that means. Like, what does it mean to do this? You need good communication skills. What does this mean that they can provide a lecture to 300, or that their writing skills, or what exactly does it mean? So we really define the criteria in terms of maybe financial acumen, leadership style. Servant leadership was extremely important in Holland, and so we would kind of define these, what it meant, so that when we are doing all the pre-screening and whittling it down from 60 to 70 candidates down to a few that we're going to present to the search committee, we're all on the same page, that all the people present have those things that everybody has already said are important. And we kind of go through things like, do they have to have been a prior city manager? Do they have to have been at this type of city? Do they have to have managed or launched this type of initiative? And so once you really have a clear picture, it makes it really easy for the search committee and city council to understand, okay, this is what we want, and when we're going, then we use those inputs to really craft the job description that highlights those key things that we want. It's, you see those job descriptions and here's 50 things we want. It's like, no, these are the key things that we really must have. So people can also understand what maybe the challenges are, what the opportunities are, so they can self-select in, and we're marketing it appropriately. And then when myself and my team are interviewing to people and talking to them, we can also make sure that there's going to be a good fit, so that when it comes down to the interview process, everybody should be a really solid fit that's already been vetted.
Thank you. Councilman Hamilton has the next question.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. What will be unique about your search? What will you do that other firms won't do? What won't you do that that other firms do? And how will that help you find a candidate that they won't be able to find?
Yeah, well, I think that some of the unique approaches that we've taken, and it has been interesting, because when I was going through the Holland search, there was another search that was going on that was experiencing some challenges, and in the last few months we've observed, we've really been trying to learn more about best practices in this area, and so I think probably the biggest differentiator is that upfront investment in the qualities and understanding what people need and want, so that you don't end up with a slate of candidates that are off the mark. I think another key piece is the amount of effort that we put into it. I mean, all of the interviews, doing community surveys, investing upfront, and making it custom to each community is so important, because somebody that looks great which is a perfect fit for one community will be a horrible fit for another. But until you really get into those details and talk to dozens of people and get lots of input, you don't really know. So I think that the amount of upfront planning that we do is a little bit unique. I do think that our social media skills and our efficiency that we've honed by doing all these other searches that have been focused on startups and being extremely efficient are also some unique qualities. And I think our passion for Michigan, we only focus on Michigan. My experience with having two parents that were on city council and very community-minded, my experience in state government where I was exposed to many issues such as some of the revenue sharing issues that I know are on top of people's mind through just general conversations, being involved with senior leadership at MEDC, that will give me also a unique experience that I think could benefit this process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next I'll call on Councilman Pennington with the next question.
So past indiscretions have torpedoed many candidates in many different facets of life. So this background checks are so important in this day and age. What type of screening do you do on your candidates? When do you do it? And how do you get this information to us at City Council?
Sure, so we do a little bit of cyber stalking, internet review, pretty early on in the process, and there are lots of easy ways to do that. But we actually do, for our strongest candidates, we actually use ASG. It's an investigative firm that we do the background checks before we present them to the search committee. So that so if there's major issues, that'll come up. We actually also do reference checking before they come. We get their references. We don't necessarily contact them yet, but we understand who that they would be. And because most of these folks are in public fields, it's pretty easy to get good information based on what they've done just from a pretty thorough internet search, but we do the official background checks prior as well.
What is ASG?
It's an investigative services group, that private investigative firm that would do our background checks for us.
Okay.
You're welcome. And the candidates sign off on that, and it's a really good process.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Abraham for the next question.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. So City Council has an optimistic view of the city and its upside potential naturally. So we're going to assume that top candidates are going to come out and apply. Do you perceive any obstacles in attracting top talent? And in your view, are there any specific actions that we can take as a council to help lure the best candidates to the city?
I'm not aware of any concerns. I've been very impressed by observing your interactions and the community focus, so that's a plus. I mean, the fiscal rating that you have, the community aspects, you are a really good community that will be attractive. I mean, compensation is something that can be, you want to make sure it's a competitive salary and there's some flexibility there. I do not have any concerns at this point. I'm pretty excited about it. But as I get to know, go through some of the interviews and get to know, especially on the city staff side, I'm making sure I understand more of the culture at City Hall and what type of leader would be a best fit, would be another factor that I would take into account.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And last, I'll call on Councilman Baker for his question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Amy, for coming. So my question is, life and success is often about learning from past mistakes or missteps. Please describe a hiring process experience that perhaps did not go as you had planned, but provided you with a great learning experience for your next hiring, and how that would be of benefit to us in Troy.
Sure. Yeah, gosh, with 400 searches, I do think that I get smarter every day. I mean, part of that would be, especially coming into the Holland search, I wasn't as familiar with the Open Meetings Act and if it how some of those issues applied to the search committee, and found out that it did. And so at one point, a meeting was not properly noticed, and so we had to cancel the meeting and then reschedule the next day, and it was in December. So we were right before the holidays, and we were trying to get the search launched because they were also under a tight time frame. So I definitely think I went up a pretty sharp learning curve in terms of Open Meetings Act, that I feel and I even know how to you cannot do a straw ballot at a selection meeting either. That's another thing I learned. So yeah.
Very good. We have an opportunity now to maybe ask some questions that might be related to some of the questions that were already asked. And if you don't mind, if I could just start, you keep mentioning search committee. What is your idea of putting together a search committee? What does that involve?
What we did in Holland, and I kind of modeled it off of what they have done in Austin, Texas, when they were going through their city manager search as well. So what they did is they had, there was 4 city council representatives that were put on so it was, so it was a 9-person, it was 8 city council members plus a mayor of 9, and so they didn't want more than 4 on the search committee. And so there were 4 people that were on it. I helped make a recommendation for who that would be when I was doing my initial intake interviews of city council. Some people were very clearly interested, some people were very clearly not interested. I made a recommendation, and it was of who from city council should be on, and then what we had decided in advance was that anybody that was not represented could pick someone to be on city council, on the search committee. So we ended up with a 9-person search committee, and we really wanted to make sure that the community was very well represented in a variety of different ways. It was a very inclusive group, and that group provided some additional input into the process beyond just the people that were representing on the city council, but with the clear understanding, though, that city council was very well represented on the committee and that they had final authority for who to select. But I think it helped provide some additional community input, provided some leadership opportunities for other people in the community that wanted to get involved, and provided some additional voices that weren't necessarily available. I think some of the benefits to having this group, and we didn't have that many meetings. We had kind of the initial meeting to review the draft. I talked to everybody ahead of time, and then we had one meeting to review the job description as well as the talent rubric, and then we had a second meeting to decide who from the finalists should be interviewed. And then City Council interviewed all of the finalists and made the, and then the group, also the search committee came back to make a recommendation. That recommendation was, the search committee actually in Holland recommended 2 of the 3 candidates to City Council, and then City Council obviously made the final decision about who to manage. So I have seen other, it's not obviously a requirement. There's many ways to approach it, but I do think it provides a little bit more dialogue with a more focused group that can be beneficial. Especially if there is if people are are all super busy and have lots of other meetings. So being able to provide another forum for this is a nice benefit, I think, while still maintaining your control.
Very good. Any other follow-up from the council? Councilman Penny.
So thanks for coming. The question I have is, I own a small business, so I appreciate where you're coming from. The other candidates are larger firms, obviously. But so that is disadvantages, but also advantages as well. So you said you had 12 people on your team, and how many have been with you from the start, and how many would you say are newer to the recruitment?
Well, at first it was just me, and then I added one. I think in the first year I added 2 people that I'd worked with previously at Ann Arbor Spark who were looking for opportunities. One was my right-hand person in the talent area, and that second year. We started growing quickly, so we brought on a kind of a bookkeeper and an admin person as well as to do some of our searches, and then we brought on I think 3 or 4 other recruiters into that area, and then we added kind of a new layer of more associates and people with less experience. So we kind of have myself, then we have 2 managers, then we have a group of senior consultants, and we have associates, and so. Just as you grow from structure, you have to kind of start somewhere and then build it out. In terms of the backgrounds, I have, I think 3 people have master's degrees in human resources. So there's a very deep HR background. A few people have had prior talent and recruiting experience, although some people have not, are relatively new to the area. Of our junior associates, one had some accounting background, or one had some search background. One person had about 8 months of HR experience, which was a little bit more broad than just search. But we've really honed our processes and our methods and our approach so that we can train people, and that's kind of our approach to growing, is to really nail down the processes and be efficient and be able to bring in additional people who can learn it and can kind of grow from within.
I do exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when everyone is done, I want to ask that other question that I asked for the first candidate when everyone else has the opportunity.
Councilman Henderson.
Warranty came up in the first conversation. Do you have a warranty? How long is it? What do you do?
Warranty.
In the event we let's say we hire somebody and then they don't stick.
I don't normally do warranties, but I also want everybody to love me all the time and do whatever it takes. So we, if something happened after 90 days, I would try to work with you, especially if it happened, something happened very quickly. We still would have the candidate pool that we could tap into. I did not include that because it's not. If something happened 6 months later that was beyond our control, I don't really have a funding mechanism to replace that person, but that would be something that I could definitely consider over during contract negotiations. If people feel it is important, we could put one in place.
Any other council comments before we get back to Councilman Pennington?
So the other question I had is, as a search firm, what % of your searches are for city managers in particular, and what % are for other types of candidates?
So far we've done 1 out of 400, so that would be 0.25%.
Oh, okay.
However, 2 communities in southeast Michigan in the last month have reached out to us directly asking for us to submit bids. We actually have two other, we have, some other things that might be coming up very soon. And this is a target area for us. We had a lot of fun with the first one. I still get the Holland Sentinel every day and follow their news. We get very attached to our client. And we love it. I mean, it's a nice fit to what we do. We know the community, kind of my unique background, both from my family perspective and then my experience at the state, provides a nice need. And that we feel that we did a really good job. On the first one, we bring some unique things to the market, and we are dedicated to continuing this. But we are pretty new in this area.
We say you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Not everybody can come in with, a lot of experience. You have to start somewhere. Any other questions from council? Did you want to follow up with any closing remarks?
I guess just another huge appreciation. This is so exciting for me to be here. I've really, enjoyed getting to you're bigger in person than on my TV. I was doing so well. But I really appreciate the opportunity and the willingness for you to take a chance on getting to know me a little bit better and having me here today. So thank you for your time very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's true. There's thieves everywhere. She looked at me when she made that comment. I knew I shouldn't have had that second plate of barbecue. No. She said it looked larger.
Objects in the conference room look larger than they appear.
Are smaller than they appear.
Bad hit.
Okay, if I run and get water.
Where's it from?
Oh.
Oh.
Mayor? I'm
Hmm.
running to get water.
He's not in a bad
Yeah, can you grab me one?
Sure.
Thank you.
That was terrible.
Why don't I go get it?
Johnny Knox.
Yeah, I'll go get it.
Yeah. Did we find him?
They've been here, they got here just as, but are you guys, when you're ready, I can go get her.
We're getting water. We're getting a couple of waters.
I will, when she gets here, explain that she did get here, might have been a minute late, but, pretty much.
They were told. They were told
We're
her.
not interested.
Yeah, they came from Texas.
Yeah.
No, that's the other one. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
What's your part?
Terrible. Yeah. Top of the golf course, eh?
Signature on top of it.
I'm gonna use my finger this time.
Are we
Yes,
ready?
we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Did we bring a melon La Croix for everyone?
My wife loves
You're not
those.
very good, you're not missing anything.
Oh, okay, I'm sure they're not any good.
Not very good.
They don't have much flavor, but my wife loves them, so. She hates fake sugar, so those don't have any fake sugar.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. I know we told you to be here at a specific time, and we ended up being a little finished early on the first interview, so.
Well, it's obviously a sign of great efficiency on your part.
I would hope so. Before we get going, I'll ask Ms. Mertz to give a few opening remarks about the process that we're going to have here. She's our purchasing manager, and she'll go over a few things, and then we'll get going.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Like I mentioned, this will be a 40-minute interview. I'll be the timekeeper. Each of the council members has a question, of which they've asked the same question to the other firms, so using the same format. And they all have little sheets here to take notes, so in case you notice that they're taking notes. And like I said, it'll be 40 minutes, and there will probably be a little bit of time at the end for follow-up. So if you want to start out now with a very brief introduction, like 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll turn it over to the mayor for questions.
Sure. I'm Kathy Grinzinger, by the way. I'm the lead executive recruiter for the Michigan Municipal League. I came to this position with about 30 years of local government experience. I've held just about every position except those that would have required me to carry a weapon or drive a really big truck. I came to the league following my position as city manager in Mount Pleasant. We are very appreciative of you inviting us and giving us the opportunity today to talk to you about our search process. I'd like to summarize a couple of points that may come up in your questions, so I'll sort of lay that groundwork. In the area of qualifications, the Michigan Municipal League finds itself to be uniquely qualified in executive search. We've been in this business for 20 years. We've done hundreds of searches for cities, townships, counties, and regional authorities. We are exclusively a public and government firm. It's the only work we do, and so we understand your perspective probably in a way that very few of our competitors can. In several areas, our knowledge base is much deeper. We have a very strong understanding of the Open Meetings Act, the Freedom of Information Act. Our search facilitators are all ICMA members and follow that code of ethics and assume all of the professionals we engage with will follow that as well. We regularly test our methodology, survey our client base, and continuously improve what we do. You'd be working with Joyce Parker if you choose to go with the league. Ms. Parker has been a city manager in Michigan and Illinois. She's well-regarded and awarded civil servant. She has been in the search business for probably the last decade and also worked with other cities in organizational issues, strategic planning, and goal setting, and personnel assessment. She will be supported and represented by a large contingent of professionals at the league, including the offices of human resources, information technology, municipal, and labor law. And while all of our focus is in Michigan, 50% of our applicants now are nationwide. When you look at the process steps, much of what all search facilitators, recruitment consultants do is similar. Some of the differences you may find are that we spent a great deal of time at the front end, first working with you to establish benchmarks and timelines so that all of you understand the process and you stay well informed. We spend a great deal of time at the front end, and intensive work at the front end, to engage not only the council but the staff, and we're recommending that Troy engage the citizenry at both the front and the back end to make sure that the match between your new executive and the city of Troy fits in with the wider organization and the wider community. And as mentioned, we encourage commitment to the ICMA Board of Code of Ethics, so that if your chosen manager would leave within the first year, which is not an acceptable decision under the ICMA Code of Ethics, we would come in, repeat the search for only the cost of direct advertising. In the pricing area, we are one inclusive price, no add-ons, no reimbursables. I think you saw from our proposal that we're recommending that Troy engage in a search process that includes the nationwide thrust with multiple advertising outlets and social media contacts, that you engage the staff and the public in putting the profile together, that you may wish to do some preliminary background investigations of all semifinalists, and then engage the community a second time in a meet and greet. If that is the contract you're interested in or the service you're interested in, we do that for $19,200, and it takes 120 days to complete. You can certainly diminish that cost if you wish by removing some of those optional services that I just mentioned. And finally, we're different from anyone else you're going to talk to because the executive search service that we provide for our clients is only one of our business centers. We are a mission-driven organization, one of the oldest and most respected of its kind in the country. So our overriding mission is not just about putting a body in the office down the hall. It is to make sure that together we add to the success and the prosperity of the state by supporting the success and prosperity of each of our client communities. So even when the search process is done, we are here to be your advocate, your training partner, your mentor, service provider, and primarily your conduit to networking with all of your peers and other professionals in the field. So as we walk through the questions, I'm sure we're going to talk in detail about some of those things, but I wanted to summarize what we think is our unique ability to provide service to the city of Troy.
Very good, thank you. You probably answered questions already.
I'm an old city manager, I talk in bullet points.
We're still going to ask the same questions that we asked. And you already talked about the timeline, but my question is, please review the anticipated timeline to complete the executive search. I know you said 120 days. I'm sure you know what our charter requirement is. And when you did submit your first proposal, you said that you couldn't meet our deadline. So you might want to just talk, if you could talk about the timeline, please.
We have tested that timeline and broken it down in a number of different ways. And while there may be ways to move things closer depending on what your meeting schedule and the availability of the council is, we would rather under-promise and over-deliver. There are a couple of things that make that timeline the length of that we estimate it. The first is that we always leave all the advertising up and open for full 4 weeks. We do that because we usually work with a number of sources depending on the type of profile you put together. We also have a fairly in-depth social media outreach, and we do what we call in the business passive recruitment, because it would be inappropriate, of course, for us to steal a really good city manager from one place just to move him or her to another. So we knock on doors, and we have found that the best candidates do the greatest amount of research, so we are sensitive to their time as well. One of the other reasons that our search process might be more protracted, or that we are unwilling, one of the things we are unwilling to shrink, is we do a very extensive pre-screening process before we ever bring you a list of potential semifinalists. Once we build our matrix based on your profile and test all of the applicants against that, those applicants that reach a level of meeting most of the skills and talents you're looking for, we interview all of those people personally. We check a number of references. We work through a confidentiality waiver, allowing us to get deep into that reference if we can. We also do a very extensive online search and attempt to determine whether there would be anything in the past that might embarrass you if the candidate was seated for a public interview. That process, because it is so extensive and depending on the number of candidates that reach that level, can take 10 to 15 business days to do it well. So there are a couple of things that are just critical to that timeline. Some of the things are do have some flexibility that you might be able to work out with Ms. Parker, particularly if you're willing to meet in special meeting and special session relatively soon to get your profiling process done between council and staff and community. If you can stay on target to go into closed session, generally the applicants, the most sought after applicants are requesting confidentiality. So your first review of those people will be in closed session. So if you're willing to meet in special session, that can shrink down your time. If you're willing to do your homework on reviewing questions and formats for the interview, but it would be, it's a really good word, inappropriate, I guess, for me to promise that we could do that in 90 days and bring you a less than stellar group of people who were screened as well as we like to.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, I'll call on Councilman Henderson for the next question.
You've never heard this before from any community, but we're looking for the best of the best for us.
Yes, you are. Yes, absolutely.
That said, though, and I think you touched on this earlier, you said 50% of your recruits now are from out of state?
Yes, sir.
So does that mean you work with companies outside of the state,
No.
or 50% of those recruits that come to Michigan companies that you work with?
50% of the people that come to us in a search process are from outside of Michigan. During the recession, right, a lot of cities lost positions like deputy city manager and assistant city manager, community development director, those kind of feeding pipelines. The best in those professions moved on. So one of the things that we have found that gives us some stability in that pipeline is looking for people who have extremely high skill levels, but some kind of tie to Michigan, or in this case, Southeast Michigan. So we spend time in our network looking for people who are waiting to come home, who are waiting for the best possible match. Not only that, but a city the size and complexity of Troy really deserves that kind of national thrust. So we would not only look at ICMA, but we would probably spend significant time with certain state associations that may mirror the kind of issues that are critical to you. I would look at California and Texas, specifically, likely Washington State, and some of the more urban centers. So it's just to give you the widest possible pipeline from which to draw. We would hit all of our national markets. We don't subcontract, that was part of your question. We have a very solid network through ICMA and ICMA's associations and caucuses that we can do that from our base.
Didn't even have to finish the question. Thank you.
Next, I'll call on Councilwoman Hoderick for the next question.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
My question is, can you describe in detail how you will develop a comprehensive position profile for this city manager position, for
Yes.
this city, which would be approved by the Troy City Council, ensuring that we as a body are all on the same page, which, as you know, can be very difficult. In terms of our priorities for a council candidate, how do you go about affecting that and getting there?
We are committed to using the search process to help you in a couple of different ways. One is to get a candidate, an acceptable candidate in the chair. But the other thing we would like to do is give you a chance to build consensus around what it is you're looking for. If you can agree on what it is you're looking for, the decision at the back end is much easier. So we will work with you first to get your feelings individually, possibly about what it is that is your priority, but most assuredly, we will sit you all in a room in a brainstorming session and hammer it out until you get to those top priorities for skill, for talent, and what we spend a lot of time on is character and attributes. Lots of people can be budgeters, finance directors. Lots of people can write a good memo to the council, but not everyone is going to fit your personality or the personality of your citizens. And so we spend time with you doing that. We will also spend time with your staff doing the same thing. We talk to them about what their existing talents are, what the holes are in the personality match in the organization, what the culture inside that organization is. And we include an organizational profile in our outreach. We also, most often, will have the same kind of session with community members. We ask you to invite people that are, or organizations that are critical to your progress and your moving forward, or that support council, or sometimes that challenge you. And we like to put all those people in the same room as well. And we will ask them to help us understand the culture of the community, its history, the demographics of its people, what the festivals look like, why somebody wants to live in Troy versus Traverse City. And those three conversations, brainstorming, consensus building sessions will build the majority of our profile. We'll do also the same kind of stuff that every facilitator or every search consultant does. We'll read the census records, we'll check your Chamber of Commerce stuff, we'll look at the demographics, we'll run a sidebar on your budget, so we do all that too. But we really like to put together a picture of this community that will not only make you proud of the way we're recruiting, but more importantly, will encourage a person who wants to live here to apply. And we will share the narrative of that, the draft with it, so you can all comment on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Councilman Hamilton with the next question.
Thank you, Mayor. You've definitely covered a lot of this, but I'll ask it anyway. What will be unique about your search, and what will you do that other firms won't, or what won't you do that other firms do that'll help you find the candidates that other firms won't?
Okay.
Kind of a limerick.
It's like a little Irish poem. Our attitude in going into this is probably our most unique asset. We don't come at this as a private sector business or a profit-making company. We only do this because our members have asked us to do it for them. And so we have built a process that is very client-centered. Probably the first thing we do that is unique is we spend that time in consensus building to make sure that the profile that we're selling about you is something everyone can live with. Our screening process, as I mentioned before, is quite in-depth. We have moved a number of folks who have brilliant resumes and look astounding out of the pipeline because we have learned something either through our reference review or our online search. What don't we do? We don't do anything that could ever put you in jeopardy. We have done, as I said, hundreds of these, and we are backed by some of the best municipal attorneys that our association can employ. We will never get you into trouble for violations of the Open Meetings Act, for violation of Freedom of Information laws, for violation of civil rights tenets, for missing, if there are any HR people in here, for missing a BFOQ. We are very conscious of our responsibility to make sure when this is all over that the people in your community and your candidates will say this was a good, fair, and open process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Councilman Pennington for the next question.
Kathy, thanks for coming. You mentioned the pre-screening process a couple of times, so you covered part of this, but we require comprehensive background checks for this position. What screening do you do on the candidates? When do you do it? And how do you get that information to us at City Council?
Okay. We're suggesting, as I said, we do personal interviews. So we base those interviews on the skills and talent sets that you will tell us are the most critical for you. And likely you will have a list of 24 things that everyone must have. And we'll hit on the most of them that we can as we work through. We require all of our applicants to sign an open waiver at the time of submittal. So that gives us the opportunity after that interview to not only talk to references they may list, but references we find are critical to this particular community. So we may look at former employees, we may look for members of council where they're currently serving, because we are all four of our facilitators, our search facilitators are former city managers. Many people in the business we already know, or know someone who knows someone. As I mentioned, we'll do the online search, and when we get to a list of semi-finalists, we are suggesting that we do a preliminary background check and at least do a full search of criminal and civil court cases. We do all of that before we meet with you, and we generally will meet with you in closed session and share the results of all of those interviews and all of the reference reviews as well as the background check during that closed session. So you will have that information upon which to make the decision on who to interview. Generally, as I mentioned, all of those candidates will have requested confidentiality, so you'll have to take notes identifying people by number because you won't be able to take any of those documents with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Abraham for the next question.
Thanks, Mayor. City Council naturally has an optimistic view of the city and its upside potential, and therefore assumes top candidates will apply. Do you perceive any obstacles in attracting top candidates? And in your view, are there any specific actions that we as a council can take to help mitigate that?
No, you should not have any difficulty whatsoever. One of the things we will ask you as we go through our profile building is, what are your challenges? What do you perceive as the difficulties? And your honesty is really paramount in this whole process. Because if we are not honest, if you are not honest, not only about the incredible opportunities, but the difficulties, you may not be matched with someone who can handle those things you perceive as the toughest work you have to do. So we will obviously check that, we keep track of the newspaper stories and all that other marvelous stuff, but we're going to rely on you to give us some of those things are the biggest challenges. There was another part of your question that I'm missing. What can you do?
What can we do as a council to help mitigate any, I'll say, just detractions?
Well, as I mentioned, the very best and the most prepared candidates will spend just as much time researching you as you research them. I have had to say to councils in the past, please, just give me 90 days. Do not swear at each other in an open meeting. Do not throw your binder at each other. And only smile into the camera. Do not roll your eyes at each other. I am convinced that you are professionals. But you want candidates to know who you are, right? But you should know that by the time you hold interviews and they sit in front of the dais, and you say to them at the end of the interview, is there anything you'd like to ask us? They already know the answer they're expecting to hear.
Thank you. Councilman Baker has the last question.
You've had a knack of answering every question and all answers every time. It's amazing. I don't know how you do that, but I don't think you've answered mine, so this is good. Life and success is often about learning from past mistakes or missteps.
Yes.
Please describe a hiring process experience that perhaps did not go as you had planned, but provided you with a great learning experience for the next hiring, and how that would be a benefit to us in the city of Troy.
Wow. I am in the midst of a hiring process right now for a community I'm very fond of, and I missed the opportunity to ask the semifinalists a very simple question that would have saved this community a tremendous amount of grief, and that was, have you already discussed moving here with your spouse? That we have learned from. Ms. Parker was involved in a search with a county board, and I want to say they had 24 members. We try not to work in committee structures because city managers or county administrators must work for everyone. But what we learned in that particular county with the amount of political distress was that probably a committee structure would have been helpful to everyone. And as I mentioned, we survey our clients, our members after every search. We also survey our selected candidates. And we use those things in our continuous improvement team meetings to sort of tweak the process and share information. And I'm sure there have been others, but I think 2 makes a good list of challenges. 10, probably too much, right?
Thank you very much. We'll give the council an opportunity for follow-up on some of the questions that have already been asked, and who would like to, Councilman Henderson?
So you mentioned passive recruiting a little bit ago, and that piqued my interest. In other words, not poaching. And I know you probably have a policy being the MML, and maybe another company might not have it, but there's a lot of really good candidates out here, you know, and it would be really great if we could get one of those to come over. So is that just a policy that you have, or is there a legal reason to not poach? Or?
No. We just don't. We call it passive recruiting. Poaching is such an ugly word.
It is.
But if you select the league by the time we are here, we will probably already know who in Michigan are the right people to tap on the shoulder to check their interest. Your timing is good as well, because you're right in the midst of that election cycle. So some people have now worked with their new council for 6 months and are making a decision about whether or not that relationship and that fit is still good. But you're not so close to another election that people would be afraid if this group selects them, someone else will be in service by the time they find the keys to the office. We do passive recruiting. We're just a bit circumspect about it.
Councilman Baker.
I just wanted to clarify, so you, Kathy, wouldn't be involved in the search for this city? It would be...
I would support Ms. Parker, but right now we think that she would be a really good fit for you. She's very close. She's out of the community right now, but she could start as early as next week if you could all get your meetings together. But if need be, or if we need a second, I am certainly available.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
In your executive search proposal, you had indicated that Troy had once been a client, although not within the last 5 years. So I was just curious when Troy was a client and for what position.
You know, I can't tell you that.
Fair.
It's a good question, and I should have been prepared.
You anticipated every other question, so I won't hold it against you.
I think we remember, or I do.
Okay.
Councilman Holder? Councilman Holder?
I have to think that you and Ms. Parker and the MML in general are pretty familiar with this city and its challenges. Is that a fair, it's an assumption I'm sitting here making. Is that a fair assumption, or
I never second guess, you know, and I started my career, one of my careers in public information and press relations. I never make an assumption about what's going on in a community and how they operate based on press reports. I have worked with print and television and radio reporters for 40 years. And I think one of my degrees might even be in journalism, but I'm very old, so it's entirely possible I forgot. We know of Troy's success and reputation in the many things you've been involved in, but if you're asking whether or not the recent spat of stuff is of crisis mode, no, it is not.
and so you come in whether you feel you're familiar or not, you're gonna dig and learn as much as you can.
Absolutely. One of the big fits that happens too is between the manager and that organization. And that's not something that's public knowledge anywhere. But if you don't get that right, if you select a leader but no one follows, it's a failure. So there's a lot no one knows about you that has to be figured out.
Any questions from council? Follow-up questions? Anything you'd like to add?
I kind of summarized at the front end.
You did very well.
But we are very appreciative that you asked us to come. We have, in the past, had an opportunity to have several strong relationships with the city of Troy, and we are looking forward to doing that again.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Anyone need a break before we have a slight discussion? comments from council regarding the firms? As we try to, we won't be taking a vote in here, but have a discussion so that when we do get into council this evening, that we have an opportunity to make a decision. Councilman Hamilton?
I was definitely impressed that both GovHR and MML had former city managers as the people that are going to run the search. I think that's very important and very intriguing. To me, it's between those two because of that fact. It's something that really stood out to me. They know, both firms know what to do with that.
Just personally, I think when you're a firm starting out, you're at a disadvantage when you're competing against firms that have been there, done it, and have had the experience. Unfortunately, you have to start somewhere, but the same thing may apply for a city manager. Sometimes when you don't have the experience and you're going up for a job interview against someone that does have a lot of experience, it's the same issue. So I would have to agree that they have the experience. They certainly have the ability to do a good job. And Amy Sell is just starting out, and she, I think, in just my opinion, I think this is a big city, and maybe she needs a little more experience with some of the smaller cities before she leaps up into. Not to say that Holland wasn't, but just my personal opinion. I would agree with that.
She has a very impressive background.
Very, yes.
Working with the state government all the way to private industry, that's a great experience.
Absolutely. But, she's just starting out. Councilwoman Holderich?
I was really impressed with all three candidates, and appreciate staff and the work, the vetting, the RFP that went out, and there's no small amount of work that goes into that. Thank you. I think one of the things I'm thinking of, what my mind is percolating on as we sit here, is this process has the potential to be very beneficial to us as a governing body in terms of taking a step back and understanding what our priorities are. It's consistent with the question I was asking, and I'm thinking about who we talk to, that in addition to all these other things almost being equal, right, their ability to go recruit and reach out and do national connections for solid candidates. I'm thinking about, is there the cherry on the sundae here of an additional asset that they bring and a benefit in the process. And it was interesting that kind of surfaced for me in these discussions here, so I'm really glad we took the time to do this, I guess is the key observation I want to make. Because I think there's a lot of wonderful potential for us to learn about ourselves, our community, what its priorities are through this process. And that's a very, very good thing at this juncture.
Any other comments? Councilman Henderson?
Yes, I have the same reservations about Amy Sell. I mean, she did a great job. Her resume looks fantastic, but again, we're looking for the CEO of a rather large city, so I think we need somebody who has a lot more stripes on their belt. I was somewhat surprised with the MML because I really didn't want to like them, but she knocked it out of the park. I think she did a really good job. I think they have the ability to probably go into the deep depths of Michigan to find what we need for the city. And even though I think that the first company had maybe a bigger, better answer, I think, for the national question for me, I'm not sure that we're really going to find somebody from Portland to move to Michigan to run Troy. I mean, it might be out there, but I like the answer that the MML gave us in that regard as well. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Councilman Pennington?
Well, I agree with Councilman Holderich. three amazing candidates. I disagree a little bit with the evaluation on Amy Sell. I think as a small company coming forward, she may go above and beyond where, not to say that the bigger companies are just going through the motions, but you might get something that you wouldn't get with a smaller firm. But I'm okay with any of the three, really, and they're all top notch.
Councilman Draper?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think that, and to the point about Amy Sell, sometimes you do get more from the underdog or from the person who's willing to fight and give a little more, and there's value to that. It's tough because of the situation I think we find ourselves based on past events. I mean, this is a very important time in our city, so that may weigh against her a little bit, but all three gave fantastic presentations. I wish that Joyce Parker from the MML would have been here. It's hard for me to put my trust in someone that wasn't here to present. That's my only reservation about the MML at this point, because everything that Kathy said, I mean, she clearly knows what she's doing, and she was very, I mean, I met, she answered every one of our questions at each answer she gave. I don't know how she did it, but she really had she was great at that. I'm assuming Joyce, and it's an assumption, who would be working more closely with, has that same energy and passion and experience. We don't know that at this point, which is a little difficult for me. As far as GovHR goes, I again think that they were also top-notch, and we somehow managed to get three great people in here. So thanks, Mary Beth, for starting the process, and I'm glad that we ended up having this session to discuss these, because I think we would have been foolish to make a decision without doing this process. So, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
All three candidates exceeded expectations in terms of performance, and each candidate, I thought, brought something unique and special. What I do like about all three of them is that they stress the importance of community engagement throughout the process. Not just at the tail end of the process where you might have your top candidates, but also at the beginning of the process. I think that's going to be critical given where we've been as a community in the past year or so, particularly, last year we had the charter amendment that was a huge wedge driving our community apart. I think we have an opportunity with this new city manager search to understand, what's the root cause of that division, so that we can understand what our community needs. I know we're doing the survey, later this year we approved funding for it, but in some ways this may also act as a litmus test for what our community is really valuing and leveraging it for that as well. So that's something I was pleased to see all three candidates address. I am still a little apprehensive about the background searches. I think all of us are a little bit concerned about that. I'm wondering if whomever we choose, if we could require something more stringent, like what our police department does. I know when I did the Troy Citizens Police Academy, we had background search just as candidates. For that class, it's nowhere near as rigorous as what a police officer might do, but given recent events, I feel like something at that level of rigor may be appropriate to ease concerns going forward. So those are the two things that I think were top of mind for me throughout this interview process.
Great discussion, good points. Councilwoman Holder?
Is there any reason we couldn't augment this process with the process that our police department does for background checks?
I think when it comes to the discussion about putting a contract together, we can
add that to it.
We can certainly take a look at that. But for this discussion, I don't know that matters tonight. Councilman Henderson.
Thanks. We didn't talk too much about timelines. The first GovHR says 90 days, MML says 120 days. Is that any kind of concern at all? Or maybe we can...
Well, I don't think we're going to need either the 90 days at this point if we started tomorrow, correct?
Actually, Mayor, on your next agenda, you will actually find something, because that will be just before the 120 days. That's the last regular meeting before the 120 days expires. So there will be something on your agenda for a temporary appointment.
Yeah. You know, quite frankly, I think something needs to be done with the charter because it's unrealistic in today's world to do this in 90 days. So it's just something to think about for the future, I think. I don't see us meeting that deadline either way. For me, it's not a big decision-making issue for me. For the two that I think are, you know, I just my 2 cents. You know, MML has been around for a long time, and they've been doing this, and they've done it for us in the past, and they do a great job. There's no question. And I think she hit it out of the ballpark today, no question. But I have to agree with Councilman Baker that that's not who's going to be doing it either. So, you know, I have a little concern there myself. I really like some of the answers from GovHR regarding the background issues, that they do use a third-party screening right now, and we could make that even more stringent if we wanted it to. But I personally just liked that they had somebody from our area, somebody that is from Troy, is from the Rochester area, that would be really the hands-on person in the area here. So that gave them a little bit of a nod for me in that area. It's so close that I think we could do very well with either one personally, but I think, you know, it's just, I think GovHR to me just had a little bit, I like I like MML, like nothing wrong with MML. We've used them in the past. But I wish the person that was going to be doing it was here. That's my only suggestion for them in the future for me. So, having said that, do you feel comfortable doing it this way?
Just one clarification. Didn't she say that if we wanted her to be the person, that she would be able to do that?
She would assist. She could assist.
She said assist and...
If they needed her.
Yeah.
If the other one needed her. That was my understanding.
Okay, I was trying to clarify. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seriously holding, but it's a point for me. It's an issue for me.
We should have asked why she couldn't make it. I mean, if we're going to be dealing with her, you know, that's probably a question.
She said she's out of the community for a week or so. And
Right.
I guess we scheduled this without their input, so.
But that's a good point. I mean,
I'm just, you know, I don't want to throw it, but there were other issues with me with GovHR that the regional issue, but does everybody feel comfortable doing it this way? And then we'll see where it falls?
Sure.
do it now and then hand it in and then talk about it again?
I believe that Ms. Mers is happy to facilitate, and you all do, if you wanted to do it.
We can do it this way, or we can do it the way that we've picked other, where you just
I just brought this.
rank a 1, 2, and a 3, and then the one that gets the most points up there. We've done that. We have done it that way in the past.
Excuse for me.
I'm fine with you, four of us to say yes to writing it.
To do it this way, or to just vote?
Do we just want number one? Oh, it don't matter. We can do whatever you guys want to do. Is fine with me. Let's do it.
The other one works really well.
We're not voting.
The other way just works really
We just
well.
hand this in, this is...
That's public record, whatever, if you hand it in, it's going to be public record, and it will be available for anybody who would
There's no
ask
names on
for
it,
it.
so it doesn't matter. You want to rate just the top one or the top two?
Just rank all three.
Yeah, the points.
Well, we kind of some.
You can do it,
You can wear the company name, right?
you can do the company name, or if you want to just do it the way we've done it, the other way is that,
Julie did come.
we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way? Okay.
There you go. Get back to that barbecue.
Of course, this is binding, right? It's not binding.
You still have to vote on it.
Still have to discuss at the meeting, right?
Careful. I'm almost halfway. Oh, yeah, he's funny. Bill said him to me. Did she? She just talks to me, just like, lights up, and starts smiling, and it's so cool.
The notes would, we should keep your notes because they may be asked for in public record. I'm happy to keep them if you'd like me to.
Anyone can read my chicken scratch. God bless them.
Can we hang on to them until the meeting though?
Yeah, you can if you'd like to. That's fine, and then I'll collect them at the meeting. That's fine.
You're selling, thinking again.
I took them to think about it. Sometimes I come through.
Is that Mike's
No,
over?
is that the Chester?
Oh.
Which the do you want that?
Yeah, the mic is on until the gavel's hit.
You can read them.
We need to kill
We will do public comment as well. There will be a public comment as well.
That's right.
Do you want to take this a little bit further? You could.
Council will object to going out of order at this point, having public comment while we're waiting for the tabulation.
No, I don't think that's a great idea.
Anyone here wish to speak this evening, public comment?
Well, sure,
Please come up, give us your name and speak, please.
Okay.
3 minutes, please.
You want the microphone?
Please.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is David Ashland. I'm a Troy resident, and I came because I am very interested in the process of selecting a permanent city manager. I was impressed with the process this organization went through tonight. I think you were very professional, and in summarizing the result in your analysis afterwards, I kind of agree with the rankings that I think will evolve with this. I'll give you my personal comments. I think the Michigan League made an excellent pitch. I think they are well focused on meeting the requirements of this community within the state, which is obviously within the state of Michigan and this area. I think the first presenter also is very capable of doing an outstanding job. In the second presenter, I rank slightly below. I didn't rank her quite as highly as I felt some of you might have, but she was good also. So my vote would be the last person first, the first person second, and the second person third. But I don't think you can make a bad decision here. I think they're all capable capable organizations. And I think you guys are doing a great job at working your way through what is a difficult decision even at this point. I think the key to this is going to be picking out the criteria that we want in our city manager. the characteristics that are the, whatever it turns out being the 10 or the 20 or the 30 important characteristics, that will be the driver. And we have to be careful not to, in considering this, not to make mistakes that we might have made in the past when we were looking for a city manager. Not just the most recent one, but maybe going back even further. So I think we're off to a good start. So tonight I want to congratulate you on doing a good job. I don't always congratulate you on that, but tonight I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was it less than 3 minutes?
I was close. I don't see that anyone else is here to speak on public comments, so we'll wait for this tabulation, and then we'll...
Survey says.
Let's say 45 for Gov HR, 40 for MML, and 15 for Amy. So very close.
So, Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to point out that in the regular meeting, we do have the same resolution that has been there for the past couple of meetings, and that does have a blank in it. So we didn't know if there'd be consensus or not tonight, but if you are, if you're at that point and you want to move a resolution tonight to select a search firm, you'd have to insert the name of the person who you want to vote on in the regular meeting.
Very good. Okay, we will be adjourned and meet at 7:30 in the council chambers.